Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.
Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I'm Jean Till, and on today's show, we're visiting with Dan Hitchens. He's a senior editor of First Things, and we're going to be discussing Sister Claire Crockett, her impact on young people around the world, and could she potentially be a saint?
Oh, that inspiring. We're always looking for those.
Yes.
Incarnate the gospel in a way that speaks to us in our own culture and time. So we're looking forward to that, engaging Mr. Hitchens. But we move into May, the first Saturday of May, and still conscious and people really literally picking up the pieces of the devastating tornadoes, where they're 10 or 12, making their way from our Spirit Catholic Radio folks in Nebraska, Lincoln, Elkhorn, crossing the Missouri River, and just really leaving paths of destruction. Obviously, the people in Minden were hard hit the most.
Half the town?
Yeah,
wow.
50 years after having hit, and our condolences go to the family of Nick Ring, the one fatality that we know of, and the Ring's certainly part of St. Patrick Parish in Neola and the long legacy there, but for them. And of course, in the community of Tinley, the small community down in Ringgold County, so our people at St. Joseph's Parish in Mount Ayr as well. And so already they mobilized, the very next night they were cooking meals and the outreach, and
it's what we do.
People in Missouri Valley and Logan were necessary items. Obviously, the federal and state governments are going to be carrying the brunt of the disaster relief, but Catholic Charities USA has also stepped forward, and so we look to be a conduit of charity and care and solidarity with our neighbors on that front, so all that they are, and so our prayers remain, but even more what we can do to help people get their lives back in the wake of Mother Nature's devastating force. We'll be with the good people of Council Bluffs, double header there on a Wednesday night. We were there for St. Patrick, and today at Corpus Christi in Council Bluffs for Sacrament of Confirmation. And it was a signal occasion yesterday at Shelby County Catholic School. Ann Anderson, who's been there
long time.
30 years, in many capacities, but as principal and really carrying the flag for their Catholic identity. She's staying on, thankfully, as a person to do resource work for them, and so that audience is going to be blessed to have her continuing to do all they do. And then next week, looking forward to the opportunity to celebrate the centenary of the Catholic Rural Life Center, which was housed here in the Diocese of Des Moines for decades, up until 2009, before moving up north to St. Paul in Minneapolis, the University of St. Thomas campus. A major event there. Cardinal Dole will be giving a keynote lecture about the founder of Catholic Rural Life, and Monsignor James Shea, of course, of the University of Mary. So anyway, that's a long breath there, but Mr. Hitchens is with us, and welcome to the show as we span the pond today. Thank you for making time for us, Mr. Hitchens.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yes. We're going to look to kind of talk about making it personal with Sister Claire Crockett, but for yourself as well. Kind of fascinated, your role as senior editor at First Things, and also the son of a journalist, Peter Hitchens, of some renown and a political figure of sorts. What was it like growing up in your household as a boy with the supper conversations or other things? Was this a ferment where you were precociously tuned in to all matters of politics and world affairs?
Yeah, if you grow up in the house of a journalist, and you do take in, almost like the air you breathe, a lot of talk about politics and what's happening in the world and ideas. If you're lucky, you also take in something that I'm very grateful for, which is a sense that the truth really matters and that language really matters. Certainly things which, at its best, journalism can make clear. And I think that's something my parents gave me a strong sense of from the start.
So even a sense of journalism as a vocation rather than as a kind of, a master or manipulator of the message, to achieve other ends, so that the truth will out ultimately. Is that the kind of confidence that it was instilled in you?
Yes. I don't know if my dad would put it in exactly those terms, but I certainly think there's a sense that journalism is about communicating with a reader, and it's quite a precious thing to have that opportunity to speak to a reader, or indeed, a radio listener. And that is a moment which can certainly be used for, manipulation or for bad purposes, but can also, with luck, be a chance to shine a light on something that's worth knowing, and even to help people.
Marvelous. So we'll look to shine a light on Sister Claire, but with my long wind-up, we'll have to pause here, Jean.
Well, you are going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will continue our visit with Dan Hitchens, senior editor at First Things, discussing Sister Claire Crockett, her impact on young people around the world, and consideration of whether she might be a future saint. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by Skeffington's Formalware, in business since 1951, with locations in Des Moines, West Des Moines, Coralville, and Ankeny. Skeffington's Formalware, fitting you for life celebrations. Online at skeffingtons.com. Iowa Catholic Radio would like to thank our business partner, Edible Arrangements, for their support, offering fruit bouquets and gourmet dip chocolate treats. On the go or have it delivered for that special occasion, ediblearrangements.com.
Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. And on today's show, we're visiting with Dan Hitchens, senior editor of First Things, discussing Sister Claire Crockett, her impact on young people, and the potential for sainthood.
Okay, and so we'll look at this woman of great faith and her vocation. But just to kind of, again, Mr. Hitchens, Dan, how, for yourself then, English and, the opportunity for further education, but then the involvement with the First Things Journal, founded by Father Richard John Newhouse, who I was privileged to have some involvement in the Tertio Millennial Seminar in the early 2000s. So every bit the lion and figure who was such a proponent of so much within the church and his own faith journey. How for you to become senior editor, and is there still that sense of the spirit of Father Newhouse alive and well?
Oh, I hope so, yes. I think one of the really moving things about First Things is the testimonies from readers who say that First Things has helped them at a particularly important point in their lives. And surprisingly often it's from college students who say that they have a sense of their faith being very important to them, and their intellectual life, their interest in politics and culture and philosophy being important to them, but they're not sure how to bring them together. And that First Things is a monthly journal and a website has helped them to see how that might be possible. And Father Newhouse was an extraordinary man with sort of scores of interests and projects. But I think that was a big part of everything he did, was to be a man of faith and of course, a priest, and also someone who was very involved with the political debates of his time, the great cultural questions, and demonstrating how those weren't two completely separate things, but could both be part of a life.
Beautiful. And, as you continue that, is it a bit daunting at times to continue that legacy, or is that something that's more generally inspiring?
It's very daunting if you stop to think about it too long, like a lot of things. But it's also very exciting. Be not afraid,
right? Yeah.
Right. And the nice thing as well about, being an editor is you work with writers. You think, who would be the perfect writer to do something about this question or to review this book, and then you can trust in their wisdom and say, they can take it away.
Excellent. So both an editor and a contributor in your own right. We won't have the time to kind of weigh into maybe some of your more substantive essays, which, again, are marvelous pieces that I think provoke us. And, again, the lens of faith and culture are there. You talk about the print and the digital versions, and then really that kind of sets up our exploration of Sister Claire. The digital generation and the kind of migration to that as the primary means whereby people gain their news, their awareness, and perhaps engaging First Things. But Sister Claire, who is she? How does she relate to us as supposedly, modern people?
Right. Well, she was an apparently fairly obscure Irish nun who died in 2016 at the age of 33 when she was in Ecuador, and there was an earthquake in the northwest of the country, and it hit the school that she was working at, and she was killed. And there were news reports which said, this nun has died. And then in the months following, something very unexpected happened, which was that people started sending in all of these testimonies to the sisters in her order, the servant sisters of the home of the mother, a small order. All kinds of people started getting in touch, talking about how she had changed their life and helped them to convert, to come to know God better. And the thing kind of snowballed from there and hasn't stopped. A documentary was made about her life. A biography has come out, partly thanks to the internet. Well, entirely thanks to the internet. I guess the devotion has spread incredibly quickly, really all around the world. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there are claims of miracles. There are people writing in all the time saying, you know, my family prayed to Sister Clare for, you know, the conversion of this friend or family member or the healing of this illness. And it seems that, you know, people's prayers are being answered. So in some ways, it's very much like what has always happened in the past centuries of the faith, that a devotion arises to someone perhaps unexpectedly, and then spreads, and there's a great energy behind it. Obviously, the Church is cautious about these things, and we have to ultimately wait for the Church's decision about whether she's a saint, and that's a very long process. But it is a remarkable phenomenon, I think, which has touched a great many lives, including mine, and I think she is a figure who is well worth knowing about.
I was struck, you know, in the end of April, we celebrated the feast of St. Catherine of Siena, who also died at age 33, and it took 60 years for her cause for canonization, and then obviously being named a doctor of the Church in 1970. Church is in no hurry in any way, right? But the sensus fidelium kind of brings forward, and the ground up way in which the Spirit illuminates and raises a profile of somebody. As you've kind of shared some of your observations about her, and she's a woman who could have easily had a career in the music industry, perhaps, very talented in a way, but kind of resisted the temptation to succumb to a cult of personality. Is that inaccurate? Yeah. Tell us about that. Tell about her musical charism. I think that's it. More acting than music. So she thought basically she wanted to be a Hollywood actress. That was her goal, and I think this is one thing that makes her really a figure for our time, is that celebrity culture, the fascination of being world famous, this was very real to her and was her main obsession in her teenage years, and she probably could have become a famous actress because she was very charismatic, very gifted performer. She did some TV presenting and got offered a contract with Nickelodeon, which she turned down because she said, no, I don't want to do the presenting, I want to do the acting. And her career was starting to go places, so she was in a mainstream film and a bit part, but the kind of bit part that leads to a proper acting career. Anyway, she then, through a kind of remarkable series of providential accidents, ended up feeling this call to the religious life. I mean, she was sort of raised culturally Catholic in a very vague way. So her parents didn't go to Mass, but her mother would tell her and her sisters, oh, go to Mass and here's some money to light some candles in the church. And they would go to the park instead and spend the money on cigarettes. That was her kind of background. Oh, how decadent.
And then, so then she was told that some people in her town were going on a trip to Spain. Did she want to come along? And she said, yeah, absolutely, thinking this was going to be like partying in Spain and going to clubs and all that. She was a teenager. And when she turned to go on the trip, she discovered there'd been a misunderstanding. It was actually a pilgrimage, which she was sort of horrified by.
Surprise, surprise.
So she goes on this...
Holy Spirit works in mysterious ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, God can use anything.
Yeah.
So she goes on this Holy Week pilgrimage, and she's got no intention of going Good Friday liturgy. And then someone says to her, you should go because God died for you on this day. And she doesn't really understand what's going on, but she sees everyone going up to kiss the crucifix. And she thinks, well, I suppose I have to go up as well. She goes up, and as she kisses the crucifix, she understands in this moment of illumination that Jesus died for me, he loves me, and I have to give my life to him. And it's a kind of remarkable moment because she had very little formation up till then. Had this moment when she realized that in an instant. Kind of like a St. Paul road to Damascus sort of transformation. And so, to cut a long story short, she joins this order. And
excuse me, Dan. So at the moment, it wasn't that moment of being both convicted and called. It wasn't, I need to become a woman religious, but I need to give God my all. I need to give myself over to the love of Christ. Is that fair, or was it?
That's exactly right. That's like how can I repay God or make any repayment? I mean, the only thing that I can really do that's big enough is to give my whole life. And I think it was, from that and other experiences, it became clear to her that the way she was called to do that was in poverty, chastity, and obedience as a religious sister. And she has a long struggle because she still wants to become an actress and so on, but eventually she joins the order. And I think some of that same sense of, it's becoming a Hollywood actress or nothing, that kind of total commitment becomes transformed by grace into this total commitment of, I need to give everything to God in my life, which is one thing that people began to notice about her from early on, that other sisters in the order and others around her, that she had this sort of total devotion to God, which itself was kind of infectious and changed a lot of lives around her.
Did she have to win over the superiors of the order at all? Are you aware in any way, the servant sisters, that, here, this is a kind of romantic sense, perhaps, they could have been a little circumspect about her vocation, or were they immediately won over by her and compelled to say, no, this is of God for her?
I think they certainly had a sense that, it would be a struggle for her, a struggle that she could win. But, it's a famous story from early on of, I think I've forgotten his title now, but the head of the order having this conversation with her where she says,
Mother Superior or
famous.
Something like that,
Yeah, exactly. The Superior of the order saying, she says, well, I want to be famous, but I also want to be a nun, so I don't know what to do about this. So I've decided to be a famous nun. And he says, well, if you want to be a famous nun, then what you have to do is learn to obey. And she takes a long drag on her cigarette and says, okay, then, I'll obey. So, she's a very kind of witty, kind of charismatic person. And I think they saw that it would be a long road, but that, she was capable of giving herself in this way. And obviously it's a long process of formation. But people noticed that the part of her which was attention-seeking, which wanted to perform, which loved to be the actor entertaining everybody, was being kind of replaced by something which was much more focused on God, which was in a way reluctant to be the center of attention because, she wanted to preach the gospel rather than being at the center of things. And at the same time, I think God used this extraordinary gift of charisma that she had to attract people to her. And so she was a great friend to many people. There are many stories of kind of conversions coming about through her ministry to people. And one of the sisters' ministries was at a hospital in Spain where there were sort of severely terminally ill people there. And there was one man who was 40 years old, dying of AIDS. He hadn't been to confession for 24 years since he was a teenager. And he was sort of fiercely atheist and very depressed, and the only thing he'd say to anyone basically was no. And Sister Clare came to see him. She would play him songs on guitar. She'd tell him sort of funny stories from her life, and he slowly became more open to that relationship. And then she began to talk to him about God, and he underwent this extraordinary transformation. And, before he died, he'd been back to confession. He'd made his first confession for 24 years. He was receiving the Eucharist any day, and he became this sort of very devout man of prayer. It was an amazing story of God's grace. Not at all a unique story in Sister Clare's life.
Excellent, Dan. We'll push the pause button there, and we'll come back here. That's just one of countless stories. We'll look to hear a little bit more. She was not necessarily all just charming. There was another fierce side to her. So we'll look forward to this unique and complex person.
Well, stay with us as we continue our conversation with Dan Hitchens, Senior Editor of First Things, discussing Sister Clare Crockett. If you'd like to learn more about Sister Clare and read her short biography, you can search All or Nothing by Sister Kristen Gardner. And to connect with other works of our guest, go online to firstthings.com. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
Support for programming provided by Modus Maryland, offering a wide selection of clothing for a baptism, first communion, quinceañera, wedding, or any special occasion, as well as accessories and jewelry. 4120 Southeast 14th Street in Des Moines, and online, modusmaryland.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by the Sarah Vocations Ministry, including the St. Sarah Club of Des Moines and the Sarah Club of Council Bluffs. Sarah is an apostolate of the Worldwide Catholic Church dedicated to fostering and supporting priesthood and religious vocations. Sarahs strive to accomplish their mission through prayer, fellowship, and service to the bishop, priests, sisters, and all in religious formation, and in doing so to increase their own holiness. Learn more at joinsarah.org, joinserra.org. Thank you, Sarahs, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen.
So thank you, Dan Hitchens, for remaining with us. The conversion story, charmed by grace, of someone who approaches that threshold of life and death. And she kind of, not the singing nun per se, but her ministry is very diverse, both in Spain and in the States, in Florida, her bilingual capacities, and then ultimately in Ecuador. I can only imagine what she would have been like in the classroom in teaching or in proposing the various ministries that she endured or performed. Her documentary, I want to note that you brought our attention to be found online, All or Nothing. All or Nothing. I know that's going to be on my playlist here coming up. But you've also mentioned about her personality, and you kind of invoke C.S. Lewis. As for Jesus, combining intolerable severity with irresistible compassion. What a combination. How is this manifested in Sister Clare?
In terms of irresistible compassion, a very quick story about a teenage girl who was very depressed, and she'd been bullied, and she couldn't speak to anybody because as soon as she started speaking, she'd start crying. And she also had no sort of living faith in God. And Sister Clare was talking to her one day, and she said she suddenly had this powerful sense of conversion. And she said, I felt as if the Virgin Mary was giving me her love in such a powerful way that I was overwhelmed. Those who've never felt this love can't even imagine how deep it is. And she said for the first time talking to Sister Clare, she realized what it would be like, to be loved simply for who she was. And from that, she discovered God's love, and that was the moment her life changed. So that's one half, and I think we can imagine that there's some glimpse in that of what people did experience in our Lord's presence. This other thing that C.S. Lewis talks about, though, with the character of Jesus is there's the irresistible compassion and there's the intolerable severity. There's the kind of sharpness of making a decision for God. And people certainly have that with Sister Clare. I mean, there was someone who she told, I can sense the stench of sin coming off you. She said this to someone who realized that she was right.
But I took a shower. What are you talking about? Anyway.
Yeah. So, or she would say to people, you have to delete your Facebook account. if she thought they could take it. And they would say, yeah, actually, that is what's holding back my spiritual life, is spending too much time on social media and constructing this kind of alternate online self and not being myself and being who God wants me to be. So she would very much put before people, the way of following Jesus is a very beautiful path, but it also might involve these difficult decisions.
And kind of calling them out in a way that, born of great love, ultimately, you knew why she was motivated to do this for you and to be an agent of truth in that regard. And my Irish ancestry mother, that kind of feistiness there, which I happen to find very attractive, except when it's directed to me on occasion. So, but never a dull moment around such a woman. In Ecuador, then, finally, as we kind of move into the home stretch here, working with the poor, I would imagine, and also students, and fluent in Spanish. And how was the final chapter of her life then recounted?
Well, I mean, people noticed, again, she had a profound impact on all kinds of lives, young people, but also, older people, often in very complicated, difficult lives, as you say, submerged in poverty in Ecuador. And I think people also noticed about her a kind of certainly the sisters who were living with
about 20
her.
seconds to go. Just a heads up there.
Yeah, she just seemed more and more completely absorbed in God and ready to go to God. And it was just after that the end came with this earthquake. But in a sense, it was the beginning of the great devotion to her that's followed.
Oh, so that intuition. So perhaps what might be said of St. Theresa Lisieux, one of her final remarks, that I will spend my heaven doing good on earth, might be true of Sister Clare as well. So thank you, Mr. Dan Hitchens, for illuminating this personality for us, and may you continue as a journalist and to fight the good fight, but to advance the gospel within our culture.
Thank you very much, and my prayers for the people of the diocese this week especially.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Well, this has been another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. Thank you to our guests and to all of our listeners in Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, or wherever you may be listening to Iowa Catholic Radio and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.